Hello, and welcome to Media News Podcasts. Media News aims to be an authentic voice, bringing you real, truthful stories from the Middle East with a particular focus on the Kurdish question that is often ignored, self-censored, or suppressed by the mainstream media platforms. This week, we're so honored and I'm so privileged and so happy to be finally talking to Frederike Geerdink, who, as many people who would follow Media News will probably already be following her. But for those of you who don't know about Frederike, Frederike is a Dutch journalist who began her career in the early 1990s in journalism in the Netherlands, and then moved to Turkey in 2006, where she reported from Istanbul up until 2012. And then things began to get a little bit interesting, Frederike, right? Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Yes. Very happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
2012, things then started to change a little bit, didn't they?
They did. It had everything to do with a bombing in the end of 2011, the massacre of Roboski on the Turkish-Iraqi border, where 34 Kurdish citizens were bombed to death by the Turkish army. And I went there to the village for one day to make 2 news stories about it. And I came back to Istanbul and I had more questions than answers. So I kept digging and digging and digging. And it turned out to be, it turned into my first book, The Boys Are Dead. Because I saw that if I explained what happened on that square kilometer at the border, I could explain the whole Kurdish issue in Turkey. And I moved from Istanbul to Diyarbakir during that process in 2012, and then started publishing in English and Turkish and self-publishing in Kurdish as well, people helping me with translations. So the state's eyes were on me, you could say, from that moment on. Eventually, leading to 2 detentions in 2015, and in September 15, eventually, they put me on the plane first from Van in Kurdistan to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul straight to Amsterdam, and I haven't been back to Turkey ever since.
So you were banned from Turkey in 2015. I remember that you were accompanying some Kurdish civilians who were trying to, I think, stop bombings at that time. Was that right?
Yeah, it was a Human Shield group from Yüksekova.
Yeah.
Yüksekova is very close to the Iranian border. And they were setting up tents in a valley where, because the peace process that was going on between 13 and 15 had just ended, so the fighting started again. So this group was supposed to stop the fighting in that valley.
Okay.
And I was making a story about them. Yeah.
Okay, so then you were banned from Turkey. I mean, I know that was quite a traumatic experience for you because you had really set up such a life in Diyarbakir, and you loved living in Diyarbakir and reporting on the Kurdish issue. So then, you were deported. And so then, how did the idea? I mean, so tonight we really want to talk about your book. This Fire Never Dies. It's a story of you deciding to go and spend 1 year with the PKK from May 2016 to June 2017. The most extraordinary story that I think I've ever read about the Kurdish issue, and the way that Kurdish guerrillas opened their minds, I guess, to you. But how did the book originally sort of come to your mind? I mean, how did you go about it?
Yeah, that's the start of the book also, because people told me when I sort of finished it, they said you have to add a preface because people don't know what the hell you are doing. Why are you doing this? You know,
Mm.
it's really strange thing to do, and for me it wasn't strange at all. But they said you need some explanation, and for me, it was a very logical continuation of my work in Turkey. But the idea came sort of in a split second. It was 2 months after Turkey kicked me out. It was November 15. And I went to the Kandil Mountains to have an interview with Jamil Bayik, the co-leader there in the mountains. And we were, me and the press man and a photographer that I was with, were waiting for Jamil Bayik, and we were looking out over a valley, and it was so beautiful. And first I thought I felt that I wanted to stay there, but I thought I'm not a fighter. How can I stay? And then I thought, but hey, I'm a journalist. So that gives some options. So I immediately said to the press man, like, hey, I have a crazy plan. And he said, oh, we love crazy plans. Let's hear it. And then I said, what if I come to you for a year and write a book about it? It was like, it happened in 5 minutes.
Good heavens.
And he said, I'll talk about it with with the people who make decisions about this, and I'll get back to you. And a month later or something, they said, it's okay, you can come. And
amazing. And then so then Avashin Ahmed,
emerged.
That was your name for the next year. Avashin Ahmed, your nom de guerre, well, nom de journalist, I guess, rather.
Yeah.
And so begins the most extraordinary story of you traveling around the mountains of Kurdistan, but not just the mountains of Kurdistan. You also travel to Kamishli, to Raqqa, to Kandil, to Kirkuk, to Suleimani, and you're up in the mountains. You're
Shingal,
to Shingal, amongst the Kurdish fighters, the followers of Öcalan. It's the imagery that you give us of these beautiful scenes of pools and rock pools and caves and just absolutely mind-boggling. But of course, the most fascinating and the most profound thing that really comes out of the book is that you have these conversations with these Kurdish fighters, and you explain, this is a group that is one of the most misrepresented, labeled organizations probably in the world, that is subject to such psychological warfare and misinformation. And you cut through all of that, and you have these incredible conversations with Kurdish guerrillas, and you tease out of them, the reasons that they're there. And there's no better explanation, in my view, of the whole Kurdish issue, and being able to let these fighters speak for themselves. Extraordinary.
Yeah, but that was actually why it was a good continuation of my work in Turkey, because in Turkey or in Turkey and in Bakur, so in North Kurdistan, in the part occupied by Turkey, I've always traveled to cities, to towns, to villages, and talked to the common people. I've interviewed like a mayor or politicians in Ankara, HDP politicians. But I prefer to talk to the common people, and that's what I thought also with this project. I've interviewed Jamil Bayik several times. I've interviewed the other co-leader, Besse Hozat. I've interviewed some other people in the leadership. But after you've done that a few times, you sort of know what they're going to say and what their vision is. And they also talk to you because they want their story out, and they, it's more strategic way of talking for them as well.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I can replicate what I've been doing all these years, talking to the common people. So talk to the common fighters.
Yeah.
So that was also a continuation of what I like to do, because if you talk to the common people, then you get to know the real story.
And were you surprised by the conversations that you had?
Well, the nice thing was that they very much enabled it. I never felt there was something that I couldn't ask. And even when I could even say to one of the fighters, it was in Kirkuk, if I remember well, I thought he was behaving a little bit macho-like, and I didn't like it, and I could say that. Because men in the PKK are not supposed to be machos, they're supposed to work on that. So I said that, like, you're behaving a little bit too macho for me, I don't like it. And he apologized and he explained his background, and they would never get upset or defend themselves in a stupid way, but explain themselves and take it as a start of a conversation about their ideas.
Yeah, and
so it's on me, but it's also very much on them, because if I wouldn't have been able to talk to anybody and to ask things, then I would have had to stop the project. Yeah.
So, one of the most interesting parts, I think, of the ideology that you have these conversations with many of the women Kurdish fighters, and men, actually, to be perfectly honest. There's been a lot has been written about the women's revolution, especially that is continuing in the autonomous administration of northeast Syria, what we used to call Rojava. But you go really to the root of the ideology, and you have conversations that take us to the sort of heart of Öcalan's ideas about women's liberation, and going back to Neolithic sort of communities. Where matriarchal societies existed then, and the way that the fighters explain it, really, for me, for the first time, I've kind of had a general idea about Öcalan's theories about women's liberation, but the way that you put it in your book, it comes over. It makes much more sense, and it's actually going to inspire me to read a little bit more. Can you just tell us a bit more about that sort of Neolithic centered matriarchal sort of civilization that is based in the Middle East, and you explain in one part of your book about that. Perhaps could you give us a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I can. For me, I'm always working from my own curiosity, and this ideology is far away from what we grow up with in the West.
Yeah.
So things that they say always raise everything that the guerrillas explain to me, raise more questions. And I ask all the questions, and I'm not afraid to ask, like, what are maybe stupid questions or something. But whenever I ask something about the ideology, well, often they would go back to Neolithic times, and at some point it also started to annoy me a little bit. Said, okay, can we go the last century or something? Yeah, but first we have to go back to the Neolithic. And it's very important, because also scientists say there's a lot unknown still. But it seems to be true that in those days society was more matriarchal than patriarchal. And And they say that is more rooted in what is suitable for humanity. Because the way we live our lives now on this planet is it's destroying the planet. And it's destroying humanity, capitalism, the way we handle our lives now is not sustainable. And if we go back to matriarchal point of view, it is more centered around community and about preserving us as humankind, you could say. But it is, of course, 10,000 years before Christ, so 12,000 years ago. And for me, it was like, okay, but how, you're not going back to those, like you can use all the technological advance we've made, but you can still abolish all the destructive systems that we have now. And they actually say they are bound to collapse, like capitalism, because they say it cannot survive. It is so destructive, it destroys itself. It will. And we have to be, at the moment when it does collapse, we have to be ready with a different system. And it has to be centered around matriarchal point of view, like community care. But I talked to one fighter. She was in her 50s. She'd been with the PKK for a long time. And I asked her, she said this Neolithic person is still alive in us.
Yeah.
And we need to nurture that.
Yeah.
And I said, how can this be? It's like 12,000 years ago. And she said, well, it's simple biology. If you have children, they're going to be part of you. It's your DNA. It's you. And you continue that over the generations.
I think
So
she
that
asked. I think she asked you. Sorry, Frederike.
Yeah.
But I think she asked you also about how you would feel if somebody told you that somebody was.
Let me. Yeah. I'm getting there. Exactly getting there. She said, like, what do you feel when you see that a child dies of hunger, or what do you see when you see that a Yazidi woman is sold on a market in Raqqa? What do you see? And I said, it's terrible, and it's hurting. And she said, that is exactly the seed that is still in everybody. That is the seed of the matriarchy, that you want to care and that you want to preserve life. And that is in all of us. And capitalism and patriarchy and all these destructive systems can sort of make you not aware of it anymore.
Yeah.
But everybody has it in themselves. So we have to nurture it and bring it back to life, because that is life preserving and caring, and that's where we need to be.
And of course, these societies were in the Mesopotamia, in between the Euphrates and the Tigris. So these ideas have been very much targeted to the people of the region as well. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, and that's why that is why the system is also it is good for the whole planet. But this whole system of nation states, for example, some people actually, I know that some people who are considered to be experts on Turkey, they still don't believe that the PKK doesn't want a Kurdish nation state. But the nation state is also a patriarchal capitalist entity. So it really needs to be broken down as well. And especially in the Middle East, where this matriarchal system without nation states is very suitable, because the Middle East is historically multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multilinguistic. So whichever nation state you carve out, there's going to be minorities, and there's people who are not going to fit the majority identity.
Which leads
to do just to the region and to mankind, because diversity is everything. It's a fact of life. So it is the only way to respect the diversity of the region and eventually of mankind again.
Which leads us, of course, to, these are theoretical positions, but actually they're not theoretical positions, because it then leads us to the autonomous administration of Northeast Syria. And you go there in your book as well, and you talk to many people there. And it's worth saying that, that this idea of democratic autonomy is actually living and breathing, and is being experienced and enjoyed and respected, not just by Kurds in the northeast of Syria, but by in areas where there's Arab majorities, like places like Manbij and Raqqa, and women are very much supportive of these administrations. Is that what you found as well?
Yes, but I do have to say that I spent all my time with the armed groups. So I didn't investigate the autonomous system, the civilian part of it.
Okay.
So I was at the military bases, and then I was at the front around Ain Issa, north of Raqqa, in April, May 17. So later that year, in November it was, if I'm not mistaken, that Raqqa was eventually that ISIS was kicked out. But of course, the armed forces in northeast Syria are very important, because they are the self-defense forces. And self-defense is, of course, very important in this whole concept. And I learned a lot about that in Shengal also, which is in northwest Iraq. Because the PKK, after the genocide happened there at the Yazidis in early August 14, the PKK rushed to Shengal and sort of tried to save whatever they could. And they made a corridor so people could flee to northeast Syria, but they asked the young men to stay to set up a self-defense force, and it still exists, Shengal Protection Forces.
Yeah.
And it's a very crucial part of self-administration, to be able to defend yourself. And that's also what I found in the beginning, in the first few months that I was mainly in Kandil. I asked fighters, I thought that was a very important question. I asked them, when are you going to give up your weapon? When are you going to, give it in? And most of them said, like, probably never, because if the Kurdish issue in Turkey is solved, then Kurdistan will need a self-protection force, and then will probably be reorganized in one way or the other to be a self-defense force for the Kurds. It's not like the Turkish army can stay then or something, And if then it is decided by the organization that I get another task for which my weapon is not needed, then fine. But self-defense is a very important part. On the other hand, they said it's only part of the story, because people think the PKK is about weapons, but we're not about weapons at all. We're building an alternative society, and it needs protection. And this is the Middle East. We need weapons. Our people need protection, but it's not about weapons at all. So after some time, I stopped asking that question, because I thought this is very much a question from the perspective that I need to let go.
You know what? We're already 25 minutes into this, and it's
Oh,
just extraordinary how that has just whizzed by. But it's testimony to the book. I mean, just very, very quickly. I mean, you also go on to talk about. I mean, you you take on some very direct issues which have been quite controversial over the years in terms of the Turkish state's narrative. And you answer them in such clear ways. Things to do with the democratic autonomy, urban resistance in places like Cizre, Nusaybin, Şırnak Sur. You take on the issues, that controversial report of Amnesty that Amnesty did in Rojava. You take on the issues of child soldiers in such a sensitive and beautiful way that people who, when they read your book, they will see. But Frederike, just lastly, in summing up, I mean, apart from all the ideology, the being able to show exactly the reality of these amazing people and their ideology, it must have been such an incredible personal experience and journey for you. I'd just like to read a little quote that you do at the end, which indicates the sort of effect that must have had on you. It's your last day, and you're in, I think, in Rojava, in Kamishli, maybe, or in Karakoç mountain. And you wake up in the morning and you say, at breakfast, I said to your friends around you, I'd like to share something with you. This morning in bed, I suddenly realized that my time with you is almost up. The sun appeared over the horizon, and I felt like I wasn't quite awake, but no longer asleep either. I still feel a bit like that. I'm still here, but the transition to my own life, the confrontation with a different reality is coming. In a couple of weeks, I'll be back in the Netherlands. I think the year I spent with you will feel very unreal then, as if I've been in a different world. The youngest women around the breakfast blanket were silent. Perhaps they couldn't imagine it at all, but slightly older comrade Rosa said, I understand. I know that feeling. When I remember my life before I joined the movement, it feels like a different world too, as if it wasn't really me. The day I went to the mountains, I was born again. I can never go back. What's been the lasting effect or changes for you, Frederike?
well, not only this year in the PKK, but also the last couple of years in Turkey and Diyarbakir, they've also very much changed my view on my own country. And it taught me a lot about power structures. And when I left the Netherlands in 2006 to become a freelance correspondent in Turkey, one of the reasons I left was that I thought in the Netherlands there were not really any important big stories to tell. And I'd like to say now that I was totally blinded by my own whiteness, because I just didn't see what was going on in my own society. And I've learned to look at that in a way, like there are so many similarities between, for example, the anti-racism movement here, or people, hate against Muslims is also a part of the whole racism picture, of course. And that has so many similarities. Like if you are in Turkey and if you want to understand Turkey very well, you have to go talk to the Kurds. You really should. And if you want to know the Netherlands well, you have to go talk to Muslims and to Black people, because they experience the country much more the way it is in all its harsh realities than privileged people do. And I am privileged. So what I need to do now in the Netherlands is find a way to transform my experience in Kurdistan and in the PKK to my work as a journalist here in the Netherlands. How am I going to contribute in the same way that I try to make a contribution in Kurdistan. So that is sort of my mission here. And if the virus allows, I will definitely return to Kurdistan, and I can't wait to go to Syria again, northeast Syria, and to Turkey whenever that is going to be possible again. I don't know. But this is sort of, for me, my work is, this is my first identity, being a journalist. So I'm trying to find, like, how can I make the best contribution possible with my journalism, both in Kurdistan and now here in my own country, and trying to always look at the power structures, who's in power here and who is not in power. And it's my task to talk to the people not in power and bring their stories. So that's how it transformed me, really.
You say about reporting in Turkey and journalism in general, honest misperceptions among those who help to form our view of the world, such as journalists, columnists, commentators, and analysts, are understandable. But to be honest, I don't think there are many. Playing a part in determining the Western view of conflicts and relations in the Middle East is a great responsibility. Anyone who does not take that responsibility extremely seriously, whether out of laziness, convenience, cowardice, or for personal gain or pure malice, legitimizes abuse of power and helps conceal large-scale human rights violations. Frederike Geerdink, you honestly, for me, have been one of the leading lights in holding Turkey, and holding that power and revealing the true story of the Kurdish issue. And I know that I will speak for many people, and thanking you for doing that. I'm trying to hold on here, and hope.
Yeah, but can I please add something? I know we're taking too much time, but the last thing that you said is true, but it's also sometimes very hard to pull yourself out of your own system. I had to go all the way to Turkey to realize that I'm white,
Yeah.
And and you have to be willing, but it is not always easy, and the system is everywhere. I wish I could not live in capitalism, but I live in capitalism. What can I do? The only way to escape it would be to join the PKK, which is not something that I want to do. So you have to, we all live in this system, and you have to find a way to deal with it. And it would be good if you try to genuinely try to reflect on that. But it's not always easy. There are people who are lazy and just for their own benefit, and it's all true, but it's also not easy. I would like to add.
Of course. No, of course, I totally understand that. But in the context of Turkey's psychological war, there's so many issues, aren't there, and misrepresentation and everything. But listen, thank you so much. It's been such a short time. I wish we could talk forever, basically. But our friends in the mountains, I think they do teach us a lot, and they do humble us. And I think anybody who reads your book will definitely, take away that and will see the Kurdish issue from a completely different perspective, and from the perspective of the Kurdish people. So thank you, Frederike Geerdink, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me. I liked it too. Thank you very much.